The Nintendo Wii U came out in 2012 and was the first of the new generation of consoles, replacing the ever so popular Nintendo Wii. It had a lot to live up to, with the Wii being one of the best-selling consoles of all time, but due to the poor and confusing marketing among many other missteps, the Wii U would quickly and quietly fade into obscurity. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're taking a look at what is considered to be one of Nintendo's biggest failures, the Wii U. What is this console all about? Why is it considered a failure, and how does it hold up nearly a decade later?
We'll make this quick.
My time's dropping fast, people.
Boo!
Time to upgrade to Wii U.
With Wii U, we can play Super Mario 3D World.
Find secrets with the Wii U gamepad.
And did we mention togetherness?
Just check out the simulation.
Whoa.
I look good.
Look at that. Yeah, I look like I've been upgraded.
Get the gift of family when you upgrade to Wii U for $299.99. Game rated E for everyone.
While there's no question that the Wii U was a failure in both sales and cultural impact, the actual games for it from Nintendo are considered by fans to be very solid, many of them being rediscovered now as they're ported over to Nintendo Switch. So if you had a Wii U back in the day and enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, me saying it's a failure doesn't mean it was necessarily a bad system. In fact, after using it a lot lately, I actually think the opposite, and many of the games still hold up. The blame for the failure completely lies with Nintendo for marketing it so poorly and failing to explain exactly what the Wii U was. Not that the system didn't have its flaws, because it did, but really the marketing was just awful. I remember having heated arguments with a friend back in middle school about whether or not the Wii U was even a standalone console or just an add-on upgrade to the Wii. He thought it was an add-on, and I knew that it wasn't, so if he ever watches this and remembers it was him, well, told you so. It is hard to blame him for thinking the way he did, given the name of the console was Wii U versus, you know, the Wii. Very confusing. It didn't help that advertisements and commercials for the Wii U, such as the one you just saw, didn't really actually show much of the console itself besides the gamepad, alongside of course being terribly cringeworthy, but that's a discussion for another time. The sales of the Wii U totaled about 13.5 million, about 8 million behind the GameCube, which was also considered a commercial failure, and unsurprisingly, the Wii U, not having the same magic charm of the GameCube, hasn't developed the same cult following after the fact, although there are still definitely fans of the Wii U. The GameCube selling 21.7 million units doesn't seem that bad until you consider the PlayStation 2 of the same console generation managed to sell over 155 million units. Admittedly, the best-selling console of all time, but 21 million, 155 million, it's fair to say Nintendo was in a tough spot after the GameCube, and had definitely lost the absolute chokehold of the market they had held until the Sega Genesis hit it big in the early 90s, and then of course the original PlayStation came along. Perspective is important when looking at anything, and the Wii U is no exception. It was named after its predecessor, and going back to 2006 with the Wii launch, a new era of Nintendo was just beginning. The GameCube didn't perform well in sales. The Nintendo 64 before it failed to even touch the success of PlayStation. And although nostalgia-fueled fans have kept the consoles relevant in modern pop culture, this isn't representative of the console's popularity when they were current. Nintendo was in a tough spot, and some even thought they should just concede, let Sony and to a lesser extent Microsoft win, and purely make games and handhelds. Sega had gone a similar path, going from the Dreamcast to only making games, including on Nintendo consoles, ironically enough, and Nintendo could have done that, but also kept making handheld systems. The Game Boy Advance, after all, still was selling like crazy, in fact at quadruple the rate of the GameCube. But Nintendo didn't do that. Instead, they launched the Wii. It completely turned the company around, selling 101 million units, which beat both the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, despite being replaced by a newer system a year before either of those two. Additionally, the graphical power of the Wii was way behind the times, being in reality not much more than a GameCube GameCube in terms of technical capabilities, but accepting full-size discs and bringing motion controls. The fact that they could compete so well and even beat Microsoft and Sony without having the best hardware was mainly due to three big reasons. For one thing, they were Nintendo. People always will buy Nintendo, people like Mario. For number two, the lower powered hardware meant that the console was cheaper. For parents looking to buy something for their kids, it made more sense. And thirdly, there was the gimmick that made the Wii what it was: motion controls. Nintendo got the brilliant idea to set themselves apart from the rest of the gaming industry with a concept so simple but so foreign. Make your console appeal to everyone, not just any particular group. This has its drawbacks, but if it's done right, it can cause exactly what the Wii became: a cultural phenomenon that took the world by storm. The Wii wasn't for your quintessential gamer. It wasn't for kids, it wasn't for adults, it wasn't for anyone. It was for everyone, thanks to the straightforward concept of motion controls and the new types of gameplay that came with it. It wasn't something completely new to video games, but Nintendo found a way of doing it that made it more streamlined and accessible than ever before, and most importantly, actually enjoyable. The Wii and Wiimote brought games like Wii Sports that could be picked up and played by anybody, from your 4-year-old cousin to your 90-year-old grandma. It's just so simple, but fun, and that range of accessibility is what sold the Wii, even if the graphics weren't high definition, and you probably wouldn't want to play the latest Call of Duty on it. Though, in all fairness, from what I hear, those old Call of Duty games were actually pretty great on the Wii. But what you would play would be the latest Mario games like Mario Galaxy, which would utilize the Wiimote and motion controls in new, innovative ways. This made the experience engaging and fun, while also still feeling like a 3D Mario platformer, and in hindsight, both Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 are justly viewed as some of the greatest video games ever made. But as time went on and games continued getting more graphically impressive on Xbox 360 and PS3, as well as the factor of consumers starting to more and more adopt high-definition televisions, the Wii was quickly beginning to feel its age. While on an older CRT TV, the Wii's graphics looked fine, hook it up to a larger HD widescreen, and the low resolution and fuzzy textures would become immediately apparent. The Wii U was first conceived of in 2008, as Nintendo saw the Wii's fast road to obsolescence, as well as the scary notion that the Wii was a casual console for casual players, not the core audience of gamers. Which was true to an extent, and Nintendo would unsuccessfully attempt to rectify it with the Wii U. When it comes to marketing to classic gamers versus casual players, I think the Nintendo Switch got this right. There's a certain middle ground that you need to find where you can appeal to both those groups, from those who don't play a lot of video games, but those who also do. And the Wii may not have had as great of a reputation with core gamers in the late 2000s, as there was definitely this stigma that the Wii wasn't a real console with no HD and the silly motion controls. But there is a reason it sold so well. That broad appeal was an essential component. Regardless, Nintendo didn't like that the Wii was viewed as not being in the same class as the PS3 and Xbox 360, but they also recognized that the limitations of the Wii's older hardware were the root cause. High definition was of course going to be the main motivation to develop an upgraded console, and there initially was speculation of an upcoming revision of the Wii to come 2011 and be called the Wii HD that would bring HD video and a Blu-ray disc drive. These rumors were shut down by the Nintendo president, however, as he said there was no significant reason to bring HD to Wii, and that the addition would better fit the next generation of consoles. It was also iterated that Nintendo's focus was still on gameplay, not so much graphical fidelity, as had been a core aspect of the Wii, and one I think many of us can appreciate. The Switch today is a great example of how not necessarily having the greatest graphics doesn't really matter if the games are fun to play. In 2010, Nintendo of America President Reggie said he felt confident that the Wii had a very long life ahead of it and that no successor would come in the near future. And then only a year later, in the April of 2011, Nintendo announced that a new console would be released in 2012.
This is a day that many of us have been looking forward to for quite a while.
Now, Nintendo wasn't dumb. They knew that the motion controls on the Wii were, at least initially, the true system seller. So much so, both Microsoft and Sony tried to replicate its success with the Kinect and PlayStation Move, both of which failed. Nintendo wanted another big-name feature, or gimmick, I guess you could say, that would become a system seller and draw in consumers away from the boring typical video gaming of competitors. So this time around, the gimmick came in the form of the gamepad, something that, as strange as it might seem, was a genuinely really innovative piece of technology. It was an all-in-one touchscreen tablet and controller that served as a second screen for the base Wii U system. The design of it might look chunky, thick, and awkward, but it's a lot more streamlined and simple than you might expect. And it's surprising just how light and not uncomfortable the controller is when actually playing games. I wouldn't go so far as to say I particularly enjoy using it over a more standard controller, such as the Wii U Pro controller that you could purchase separately, but it's not bad by any means. Battery life is probably my biggest complaint. I'm also very much not a fan of the design. The glossy plastic here means scratches and fingerprints are bound to be obvious, and as often as I tried to clean this thing for the camera, it still looks dirty in pretty much every shot. It's not helped by the almost absurdly thick bezels and frames surrounding the 6.2-inch display, but naturally there were going to be severe limitations when it came to making any kind of tablet 10 years ago. Nintendo clearly thought the drawbacks would be worth it for all the new gameplay features that could be implemented with a second screen that you could touch or move around, features that might seem basic or even pointless now, but they weren't at the time. Let's remember that this was happening not very long after the iPad had come out in 2010, and the tablet craze was in full swing. Touchscreens were the next big thing, and so of course Nintendo had to bring it to gaming. The announcement was met with massive skepticism, and Nintendo's stock dropped nearly 10%, with concerns that the controller would be expensive and not as innovative as the original Wiimote. But that gamepad was the Wii U's supposed system seller, and Nintendo poured all their focus in showing it off. So much so that there was a lot of confusion on what this Wii U even was. And as mentioned earlier, a lot of people really just thought it was an upgrade to the original Wii. It didn't help that the Wii U itself looked so similar to the Wii, being small and in black or white, and just overall extremely unassuming. But for better or for worse, the Nintendo Wii U would launch in North America November 18th, 2012, and the darkest era in Nintendo history began.
With the all-new Wii U, this is how you will play next. The all-new Wii U. How you will play next.
While the Wii U had its flaws and the gamepad has always been a source of controversy, the hardware and console itself is about as solid as you could hope for from a 2012 system. It was already kind of underpowered as soon as it came out, and the 2013 Xbox One and PS4 kind of put it to shame in terms of graphical ability and performance. But this was a Nintendo machine, and they didn't really want to have the best system, but instead the best experience. The gamepad likely was a big part of the cost, so it's not a big surprise they cut some corners in the making of the actual console, and this was exactly the kind of upgrade that was needed over the Wii. Originally, there were two bundles for the Wii U. The basic bundle, which came with a white Wii U, 8 gigs of storage, the gamepad and stylus, and then there was the deluxe package, which had a black Wii U with 32 gigs as well as the gamepad. It also came with Nintendo Land, a Nintendo Network Premium subscription. Yeah, back then they actually had a service similar to PlayStation Plus or Xbox Live Gold, as they do again now with Nintendo Online. And the online for Wii U as well as 3DS is actually still currently active, although many of their services such as the Miiverse have unfortunately been discontinued. The Deluxe also came with a stand and a Wii remote sensor bar. This was my younger cousin's console that I bought off of her just recently, a few months back, and I also got quite a few games with it. Everything from Smash Brothers to Mario Kart to undeniably the best game ever made for Wii U, or really any Nintendo console of all time. It's not even close. Hello Kitty Cruisers with sorry friends. Does it say sorry? I don't actually know. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be trying this game. But anyways, looking at the console itself, it's boring. It really is. It's just a plain box, not dissimilar from the Wii, coming in a glossy plastic colored white or black. We've got a disc tray on the front with an eject button to the left, a power button there, and then a sync button to the right of it. Under that flap, we get an SD card slot, which is a nice addition, and two USB 2.0 ports. Flipping to the back, we have the yellow AC adapter port, red sensor bar connector, black AV multi-out, HDMI because high definition, definition, and then another 2 USB ports. And honestly, there's not a whole lot else worth noting besides the console doesn't stand upright like the first Wii could, so not a big deal, just a little bit different. Also, 4 USB ports, I believe that's actually more than the PS4. I'm pretty sure most PS4 models only had 2 USB ports. There's not a lot to say here. This has to be one of the most boring looking mainline consoles ever made by anybody, but that does quickly improve when you take a look at the much more interesting gamepad. It's essentially a tablet with 2 thick halves of a controller on either side, actually kind of looking a lot like a chunkier Switch or Switch Lite, or maybe a big PSP or something. It's extremely clear where the inspiration for the Switch came from, and the popular wish was that the gamepad was a standalone console. Fair to say that would play a large part in the future of Nintendo. The controller layout is a little bit odd, with the joysticks and buttons being symmetrical on either side as opposed to the offset positioning on Switch controllers today. It's also symmetrical on the Pro controller. The gamepad is thick and chunky, but gripping it and using it isn't too bad an experience, albeit a bit awkward. The tablet did have a lot of built-in innovations, with of course the touchscreen, but also a 1.3 megapixel front-facing camera, motion sensing, a microphone, a gyroscope, an accelerometer, a magnetometer. It also had NFC capabilities, which was really impressive tech for the time, with iPhone not even getting it until 2014 with the iPhone 6 allowing for Apple Pay and whatnot, as is still very popular today. The NFC would be utilized by amiibos. You know, those extremely popular Nintendo figurines that go for way too much money and are never taken out of the box by their owners. The figure can be tapped to the gamepad, allowing for cool in-game features, such as bringing in a new character or something to that extent. This is still a feature with the Switch, although not as advertised or prominent anymore. Amiibos were always going to be a cash grab, but I have to admit, they're kind of fun. Gotta be more useful than pop vinyls, right? Those don't do anything. The gamepad also came with a stylus. There's a little slot for it, just like the Nintendo DS, and the stylus just adds yet another way to play games and do things on the gamepad, and while it's not really a big major addition, it's just yet another thing that makes the gamepad so special, even if it definitely had its flaws, one of them being battery life. The gamepad is supposed to last around 3 to 5 hours. If it's been used heavily, the battery will have degraded, more than likely, and so you might not even be getting 3 hours. And charging it takes a long time. This was before the days of fast charging, and it can take over 2 hours to charge the gamepad. The dock for the Wii U, I really like. It plugs in with the Wii U charging cable, and then it has these little wheels, and you literally just slide the Wii U on and it magically charges. I find that kind of neat. But getting back on track. The whole idea of the gamepad was to allow for the player to see games in a different way, with a concept referred to as asymmetrical gaming, as stated in Nintendo's 2012 E3 press conference. And it makes sense, right? You could theoretically have something like your map or RPG class options on the gamepad screen and then the main game on the TV. It's a cool idea, and one that doesn't really exist anymore on any system. There was also the idea of always being connected, so you could just pick up the gamepad and use your system without looking at the TV. So you could use something like Miiverse and its social networking functionality. The gyroscope was there for shooter games, as you could aim with motion controls instead of joysticks. This is still a popular option today on Nintendo Switch in games like Fortnite. The display is 6.2 inches and has a resolution of 854 by 480 and can be used with your fingers or the included stylus. The resolution of 480p definitely feels rough by today's standards, but on this small a screen, it's actually not too bad, and it's really not that much worse than the Nintendo Switch, as that one only outputs 720p. Any higher a resolution would kill battery life, and given this is from 2012, I'm very much cool with it. So how does the gamepad even work? Obviously it's not the system itself, so how does it get anything from the Wii U? Basically, there's Wi-Fi built in that's specifically optimized for low latency transmission, which directly connects with the console. Through this, the display streams from the actual Wii U. Off-TV play was the method of playing games away from your TV and solely on the gamepad, which was absolutely awesome, and I remember really wanting it back when the Wii U came out. You could play on your bed or something while your family used the TV for something else, and that would have been an awesome addition for many a kid in a crowded household. In practice though, it wasn't great. It works, but the range isn't too far, which is the biggest compromise. Really, that's the issue with it using its own Wi-Fi network. And not all games support off-TV play. If asymmetrical gameplay is needed, with the gamepad showing different content, obviously you'll need both screens. Wii games, from the original Wii and Virtual Console games, also weren't compatible with this in the beginning, but a year later this was changed with the system update, although an actual Wii controller was still needed, with the gamepad only serving as a screen. And eventually, even that was less of an issue, as Nintendo would re-release Wii games digitally and fix them to work with the Wii U's control scheme. Hold up, let's back up here a little bit. Original Wii games on the Wii U. Having back backwards compatibility was one of the biggest selling points of the Wii U, as it meant that you could potentially put your Wii away completely and solely use the new console for all of your favorite games. There's no GameCube support, unfortunately, but having any form of backwards compatibility in 2012 was kinda huge, with both the PS4 and Xbox One having nothing similar at their launch in 2013. The Xbox One eventually would allow for select Xbox 360 titles to be played, but still, props to Nintendo for the consumer-friendly move by allowing Wii games to be on the Wii U. It made sense. As I've already stated, the Wii's biggest flaw looking back was the lack of high-definition video. 480p by the late 2000s and early 2010s just wasn't cutting it, and so the Wii U made that jump to the higher resolution, with most games being playable at 720p, and some select titles even going up to 1080p. That includes Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, which plays at an impressive 1080p with 60 frames per second, and The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker Remastered also hits 1080p, but I believe with only 30 frames per second. Even so, for the older Wii U, this is kind of impressive. Sure, looking at the PS4 or Xbox in comparison, it's not going to come even close, but if we compare the Wii U more closely with the PS3 or Xbox 360, we'll be painted a more accurate picture, and the graphics in a lot of these games were very good, to the point that watching this gameplay here probably doesn't look a whole lot different from what a Switch is capable of nowadays, and that's because it really isn't. Handheld, the Switch plays games in 720p, and docked, the Switch can play up to 1080p depending on the game, so no 4K and no significant performance boost from the Wii U, thanks to the entire machine being so small and portable. But it does help the Wii U age more gracefully, and going to it from the Switch doesn't feel a whole lot different, besides the way you play the games. And of course, the 480p screen on the gamepad isn't as nice, but playing on the TV feels really similar. In fact, a lot of the games are nearly exactly the same, due to the Switch having so many re-releases from the Wii U's surprisingly large and impressive library of first-party Nintendo titles that hardly anyone got to play at the time, due to, well, no one buying the Wii U. So let's take some time here and talk about the games, both the best and worst aspect of the Wii U.
With games like Splatoon,
Gotcha!
Super Mario Maker,
Wanna play?
You made this?
Yep.
and Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, there's only one thing you'll be dreaming about this holiday. Play Nintendo. Play Wii U. Games rated E to E10+.
Let me start this section off by giving my full, honest opinion. The Nintendo Wii U has one of the best first-party lineups of any Nintendo console ever. There, I said it. Don't believe me? Listen to some of these games, the majority of which were developed or at least published by Nintendo. Super Mario 3D World, Mario Kart 8, Captain Toad, Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, Hyrule Warriors, Pokken Tournament, New Super Mario Bros. U, New Super Luigi U, Xenoblade Chronicles, Pikmin 3, Wonderful 101, Project Zero Maiden of Blackwater, Lego City Undercover, and of course Zelda Breath of the Wild. These games just make up some of the highlights. There are some more here and there, please don't be offended if I don't mention your favorite game. That being said, you may have noticed a trend with all the games I listed. Every single one of those games has been ported over to the Nintendo Switch in some form, or at least has a port in the works, with the exception of Breath of the Wild, as it released on both platforms at the same time. But regardless, the fact that such a large portion of the current game library for the Switch is made up of Wii U titles that hardly anyone played because hardly anyone owned a Wii U is absolutely insane, and just goes to show the strength of the lineup. And if we look to games that haven't yet been released on Switch, the greatness doesn't end here. Nintendo Land came out at launch and was a shockingly fun party game that would use your Miis. I can honestly say my friends and I played a ton of this and had a lot of fun with it. I didn't have a Wii U when I was younger, but my friend did. Actually, a couple of them did. But the game actually managed to utilize the gamepad in a well thought out and fun way, where you could be playing in a completely different fashion by being the player with the gamepad compared to looking at the TV. So it'd be like everyone versus the person using the gamepad. We always especially enjoyed the Ghost game, where the player with the gamepad was a ghost visible only on the gamepad and had to avoid the other players who would be searching around Luigi's mansion trying to find you. Just an all-around terrific pack and title that likely would have been remembered a lot more if the system had sold better. Paper Mario Color Splash came out in 2016 and hasn't been ported over to the Switch Switch despite coming so soon before the Switch launched. It's controversial to say the least among Paper Mario fans, but it overall received good reviews and seems to be just a fun title, and one that never got a lot of attention due to being on a system made obsolete literally 6 months later. Super Mario Maker was a fantastic concept and was executed so well on the Wii U and gamepad. Of course, we received a sequel for Nintendo Switch, and I'm gonna be honest here, I think the game works better with the Wii U gamepad and stylus. I'm not sure if that's an unpopular opinion or not, but I do think having 2 screens was a huge plus for the game, especially with that stylus. It's just easier to place things, although playing the game it doesn't really matter either way, and it's still a ton of fun on either platform. The first Splatoon came out in 2015, and like Mario Maker, it would receive a sequel that was very similar to the original one, but on the Switch. My experience with this game goes no further than knowing the character from Smash Brothers, but the concept of the game was intriguing as you need to cover the map with more paint than the enemy team. Consider it to be a family-friendly team shooter. The game received high praise and was one of the best-selling games in the later half of the Wii U's life. Speaking of Smash Brothers, Super Smash Brothers for Wii U might have had the worst title of the series. Yeah, that's the title, Super Smash Brothers for Wii U, but it did a great job of bringing the game into HD in 2014. This is a game I played a ton of with friends, and it's definitely very similar, at least in gameplay and graphics, to Smash Ultimate for Switch, which is probably one of my favorite games ever made. Yoshi's Woolly World was the first Yoshi game on a main Nintendo console since 1997, and reviews were generally positive, although the stylistic choice with the wool, like seen in the title Kirby's Epic Yarn, was a bit controversial to some. The Legend of Zelda is one of the most popular and biggest franchises of Nintendo, and the Wii U is one of the only consoles not to have an exclusive mainline game. Breath of the Wild was supposed to be that, but then it was delayed and made to be the big new release at the same time as the Switch was releasing for obvious reasons. They wanted to actually sell copies. That being said, even without an exclusive Zelda title, objectively speaking, the Wii U is actually the best console for hardcore Zelda fans, more so than the Nintendo Switch. Seems strange? Well, all the main titles for the legendary franchise can be played on Wii U, from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask off the Nintendo eShop to Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, which both received fantastic HD remakes. Wind Waker especially is a game I've never played, but I have to say it looks absolutely fantastic thanks to the cel shading art style that's just held up so well, similar to how Breath of the Wild will hopefully stand the test of time for years to come. And Breath of the Wild, I mean, that's the big Zelda game in recent years, and it's on the Wii U. So if you're a Zelda fan and want one system to play all the games, the Wii U is the one for you, I suppose. I will talk about the accessibility of the Wii U later, as having the majority of Wii games compatible, as well as the controllers, was one of the best things about the console. And as a brief thought here, one thing I always felt Nintendo did really well was the whole Miiverse social media side of things. Yeah, it was useless as an actual social media service, but the interconnectivity of people commenting on games and drawing little pictures with a gamepad and seeing all the little Miis run around, it was really unique and fun, just something that gave the system a lot of personality. I'm not really a big fan of this UI in general. I do think it's a bit overcomplicated, and the basic Nintendo Switch one serves its purpose much better in my opinion, but there's a lot of charm to it, to be sure, with the whole skeuomorphism look that's become so rare in modern design. Yeah, I'm not huge on the bright white all the time, I prefer dark modes, but that was kind of like the Wii and Wii U, it just fit. However, navigating around the Wii U, especially when you were pretty full on the very low internal storage, it could be painfully slow and frustrating to use. Lag is a common occurrence, and you might as well go make a coffee when trying to load in certain apps or games. Plus, trying to get to the menu from a game would close it altogether. That's a relic of the past I sure am glad we've moved on from in recent generations of consoles, but that's how it is on the Wii U. And those games, I suppose we should go back to that. At this point, hopefully I've convinced you of the strength in that first-party Wii U lineup. All the games I've mentioned so far were published by Nintendo, and most of them developed by them as well. So what's the problem? Because there has to be a problem, right? This console didn't sell well. Well, I kinda just named like all the good games for the console because there was so little third-party support. It started off well enough with AAA titles like Assassin's Creed 3 and 4, Mass Effect 3, Batman Arkham City and Origins, Rayman Legends, Resident Evil Revelations, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 and Ghosts, Darksiders 2, Tekken Tag Tournament 2, Need for Speed Most Wanted, some LEGO titles, Deus Ex Human Revolution. There were some strong indie titles like Terraria, Shovel Knight, and that's all great and fun, but most of those games came out in like the first couple of years, and they all came to other systems as well. As for games made by third-party developers solely for Wii U, you really don't have very many many big titles. There's the launch game Zombie U, which was heavily marketed but received mixed reviews at best. Sonic Lost World, which eventually did come to PC and seems to be remembered mostly positively, albeit Mario Galaxy ripoff. Minecraft Wii U Edition, which is, guess what, just Minecraft for the Wii U, but we'll say that counts. And what the vast majority of all these games have in common is that they're from the early 2010s, namely within a couple years of the launch of the Wii U. I'm sure there's a lot of hidden gems out there, but big developers almost immediately halted development for the Wii U for a multitude of reasons, none of which are particularly hard to guess. The hardware of the Wii U was roughly on par with the Xbox 360 and PS3, despite it being about 8 years newer. A year after the Wii U's release, the PS4 and Xbox One came out, and far surpassed it power-wise, which meant that ports that did come to the Wii U were downgraded, meaning it got a game similar to what was being made for the 360 and PS3. And once those last generation games had stopped being made, it became a pain for developers to still make a game for the lower powered Wii U that wasn't selling well in the first place. For example, Assassin's Creed 4 came out for Wii U in 2013 along with PS3 and Xbox 360, and then 2014's Assassin's Creed Unity was next gen only. But in 2014, they also released a game specifically for the PS3 and Xbox 360 in Assassin's Creed Rogue, but they didn't make it for the Wii U, even though Black Flag had been on the Nintendo system. Side note, Black Flag is one of my favorite games of all time. It was also a game that got a port over to Nintendo Switch, go figure. Watch Dogs also came out for Wii U, which surprised me, but it did release on PS3 and 360 at its launch in 2014. Ubisoft was one of the last holdouts. They initially had a lot of games for Wii U, most of the ones I've mentioned, and it's too bad for the owners of the Wii U that they would eventually jump ship as well. Developers didn't see the use for the gamepad, sales dropped off super fast after launch, and it didn't help that nobody knew what the heck the Wii U was. So the brand recognition wasn't there, and if we're being real, can you really blame game publishers for not wanting to spend money on something that was unlikely to make them any money? The best example of just how disregarded the Wii U was to game devs is from EA. Of course it's EA. They made FIFA 13 for the Wii U and lots of other platforms, and then the next year, in 2013, made FIFA 14 for basically every single platform on the planet except for Wii U. I'm not really kidding, by the way. It was on Android, iOS, Windows, 3DS, Wii, Xbox 360, Xbox One, PS4, PS3, even freaking PS2, PSP, and PS Vita. I'm not sure what's more insane than it came out for PS2, PSP, and Vita, or that it was on Wii and 3DS but not the Wii U. The simple reason is that FIFA 13 really didn't do well on the platform, clearly, and so I guess it just wasn't worth making another. Although the fact that they made one for the PS2 is pretty darn telling. Before we fully move on here, there's one more game for the Wii U I want to cover. Rayman Legends, a direct sequel to 2011's Rayman Origins. This was a series finding new life long after its early PlayStation heyday, and it was set to be one of the definitive titles available at the Wii U's launch, being announced at the 2012 E3 Expo. It was to be exclusive to the Wii U, launching November 30th, 2012, only to be delayed that October into the coming year, specifically February 26th. This delay was made purely to finish the game completely, as it just wasn't ready yet. But it wouldn't take long for it to be finished, and it was said to be fully ready for the Wii U by the new launch date. But there was a problem. Ubisoft saw the financial disaster that was Zombie U, their first big exclusive for the new system, and they were concerned a similar fate lied in store for Rayman Legends, one of their most promising upcoming titles. Now, this was a flawed mentality from the get-go for one big obvious reason. Of course, a game based on a mature theme like zombies wasn't going to sell terribly well at the launch of a new Nintendo system, especially when they were clearly marketing it towards children. While perhaps later it could have found some success when the console was in the hands of a wide array of users, it just didn't make sense when most would be buying the system for Mario and the like, not shooting zombies. Rayman Legends actually fit this mantra perfectly, being a fun for all ages platformer, but Ubisoft made the controversial decision to push the launch altogether until September 2013 so that the game could release for PS3 and Xbox 360 at the same time as Wii U. Obviously, fans were upset that the Wii U version was ready to go, according to the developer, but was being delayed anyways. Why Ubisoft didn't just release it for the Wii U in February and bring it to other consoles later is beyond me, but have no fear. A demo for the game had released December 2012, and when this new delay happened and the backlash hit, Ubisoft proudly proclaimed that the Wii U and their lucky owners would get yet another exclusive demo in the future. I may be paraphrasing slightly, immediately, but as you can guess, the reception to this wasn't particularly positive. Even the actual developers themselves were unhappy with the situation, and all this was just clearly some typical corporate shenanigans. Unfortunately though, it still happened, and it was an early nail in the coffin that the Wii U was already halfway into. You could definitely argue that while this did have an impact, it wasn't necessarily Nintendo's fault, and you would be right. But I do personally feel like Nintendo should have stepped in here, perhaps paid to make the game a timed exclusive for the first year. But whether you blame Nintendo or not, it was just yet another early disaster in the life of the Wii U, something that did not bode well for its future. The lack of support so early on killed any momentum the Wii U had. The market of people who only wanted to buy Nintendo titles was certainly still there, but this wasn't a cheap console, and for many families, it would be the only one they would buy for the entirety of the generation. If your taste in gaming expanded past the initially pretty small library of Mario-type titles, then the PS4 or the Xbox One was just the obvious choice for you. This butchered Nintendo's chances at properly competing immediately, and fresh owners of the Wii U were in for a long half-decade of disappointment until the launch of Nintendo's next system. The Wii U had one of the shortest lifespans of any mainline video game system, from late 2012 to early 2017 with the release of the Nintendo Switch, and it's pretty clear why. Nintendo had enough with the very clearly failed system and wanted to cut ties as soon as they could. But during the time the Wii U was around, they didn't really do a whole lot to fix the major issues that plagued those sales numbers. And I'm not even really talking about the flaws with the console itself, but more of the whole entire marketing strategy. That little ad spot you just saw introducing Mies to Super Smash Bros. As a character is without a doubt the absolute best commercial produced during the Wii U's tenure. I'm sure there's some other gems here and there, but from the way too many ads that I watched, that was without a doubt the most entertaining and quite frankly one of the best video game ads I've ever seen. Why was this ad so great? It might seem funny, but a bit meaningless if you don't know the two men fighting. One is, and I apologize for butchering probably both of these names in advance, Satoru Iwata, an unfortunately now deceased former president and CEO of Nintendo and absolute legend in the video gaming world. The other was Reggie Fils-Aimé, the now retired former president of Nintendo of America. These are the two guys who would come on stage and introduce games, the figureheads of the company. To see them square off with some hilariously fantastical stunts in a fight Super Smash Bros. Style, it's just an absolute joy, and I think the novelty is there even if you don't know who these two men were. And I don't even think this was like an official ad as much as like a trailer for the new Mii character coming to Smash Bros. But it's so awesome, and for me this really highlights a big problem that was magnified during the Wii U's lifetime. Nintendo just kept digging their own grave by doubling down on their absolutely awful garbage tier marketing. By the time they started to wise up, the Wii U was already dead in the water and the Switch was right around the corner. If you search YouTube for Wii U ads, you'll find dozens of compilations with millions of views showing the absolute cringiest of the cringeworthy. Just so many ads that all scream, "Hey kids, we're hip, buy our system now please." Well, and actually in some cases it was just marketing to much younger children, but we'll get to that. And I think the worst one I'm not even going to show in this video because it's really long, it's like 4 minutes, but it's an ad about Super Smash Brothers, and yeah, that's I think Steve from Stranger Things, and you can just tell that they're really trying to be funny and it just falls flat. It's really bad. Where did this all go wrong? The ads with the kids and their parents might have been pretty bad, but it's easy to see an actual parent watching that and thinking that a Wii U would be a great Christmas present. So what's the problem here? Something that's been an issue for a long time is advertisements targeting children. From comic books in the 1900s to the rise of television and especially kids' cartoons, the idea quickly arose that you didn't want to market to the parents, even if they were the ones buying the product. You would want to market towards the children. Kids are stupid. They see something on TV and want it. It sounds trivial and even rude, but it's true. I was like that as a kid. You were like that as a kid. Every kid is like that. Young children don't understand the difference between an advertisement versus just a fun toy on the screen. There's no cognitive ability there to comprehend that you're being advertised to, and to know that the objective is ultimately to take advantage of you and sell whatever product is the subject of the advertisement. This is a cynical take, but it's true, and there are a number of regulations in place to make sure ads don't go too far, although obviously how effective this is debatable. But once that advertiser has the kid wanting the toy, they know that they're gonna go and beg their parents to get it, pestering them relentlessly, and then if they see that ad every day while watching their favorite cartoon, those efforts to sway mom and dad into buying something that they'll probably only play with once are going to be accelerated. You remember those old commercials that used to play on like Cartoon Network and whatnot? Hot Wheels, Barbies, you name it. Take this one for example. You may notice that the actors look a bit older than maybe you would expect to be the target demographic, and that's 100% intentional. Why? Because kids see older kids playing with these toys, and it subconsciously affirms to them that they would look cooler and older like that while they were playing with those Hot Wheels too. It's basic marketing. Kids tend to look up to older kids, and then kids that would maybe be on the fringe of playing with these toys see that they're not younger children playing with them, and that helps appeal to them as well, as opposed to Nintendo, who was supposedly making a console meant for all ages. If you're 13, 12, even like 10 years old, and you see this commercial of clearly very young kids telling their parents how bad they need a Wii U for family fun time, it's gonna be a hard sell convincing those young teens that this is a cool system and one they need over the PS4 or Xbox One that marketed itself towards a much more mature audience. PS4 commercial would have explosions and guns. These are the things, say, a 12-year-old boy wants to see, not like a 10-year-old kid telling his mom how bad he wants a Wii U. This has been a strategy for a long time. The Sega Genesis was really great with its marketing too. And so Nintendo ends up going about this completely the wrong way. And it's crazy because the Wii was marketed perfectly. You don't need explosions in your ads. That's a very specific demographic. If you want to market to everyone though, you don't just have kids. With the Wii, for example, an early ad shows two very professional looking Japanese businessmen going door to door with a Wii and just playing with these random families. It's nonsensical, sure, but it's also wholesome and engaging. It's just kind of funny. You see this and you want to watch it. It also shows that the console is fun for everyone, regardless of age, nationality, gender, profession, you name it. It doesn't matter what groups you belong to. Even in that second ad I showed, where there's a wider variety of age groups playing Wii U, there's too much of a focus on kids. And when there's an adult, usually it's just a parent playing with their kid. They do show a young couple, but they're not playing games, they're streaming a movie. Yeah, it's good to show that the console can stream movies, but by around 2012, a good portion of people already had a console capable of this, including the original Wii, which ran Netflix. You're not showing this as a fun console for all ages, you're showing it's fun for kids, and then adults can also watch movies on it. The entire subject of the horrible marketing surrounding the Wii U has been beat to death already on the internet, but I did just kind of want to re-emphasize how bad it was, and how it did really contribute to the Wii U never selling well, and immediately losing the chance to establish a foothold in that generation of gaming. The Switch has done an exponentially better job of this, showing young adults as opposed to children playing the Switch in groups at parties. This is what appeals to the younger audience, and it looks fun to the older one too. And you know, marketing's not the only factor obviously, but Nintendo has gotten a lot better at advertising in recent years, and that's something worth commending, especially after their years of horrible marketing with that Wii U, though I'll be darned if I wouldn't love some more Reggie versus Iwata type ads in my life. Overall, it might have felt like the Wii U's lifespan was painfully drawn out as slowly as possible, though in reality, as previously mentioned, it didn't even reach a full 5 years of being the best Nintendo system from late 2012 until early 2017. Compare that to the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, which both survived from 2013 to 2020, albeit with better Pro models in between, or the Nintendo Wii from 2006 to 2012. The Nintendo Switch is about as old now as the Wii U was when the Switch was launched, if you can believe that. It's crazy, but it's true, and yet I don't think the Switch is getting replaced anytime soon. If you were a Wii U owner, you were kind of screwed over from the get-go, from being promised exclusives that wouldn't happen, to just waiting on Nintendo to drop games because they were the only ones making them. And yeah, a lot of the games were really good, but when you stretch it over a pretty long period of time, it's not an ideal situation. And that latter half of the Wii U really felt quite sparse sparse in terms of new content to play. The Switch, in comparison, so far at least, has had a constant and steady stream of new games coming out, even if a good number of those are just ports and rehashes of Wii U titles. And I think it all didn't help that the Wii U never really had that game that everyone got excited for. You know what I mean? A must-play, must-buy masterpiece that was a system seller all on its own. Yeah, Super Mario 3D World got very positive reviews and was generally well received, with some praising it as one of the best Mario titles. But let's be real, it's not nearly as exciting or eye-catching as a Mario 64 or a Mario Galaxy. The Switch, on the other hand, had 2 must-play titles in its first year, and hasn't looked back since. Those 2 titles, Zelda Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, both heralded as absolute gems in the gaming world and some of the greatest games of all time. Not just Nintendo games, but of all of them in general. They are amazing games. Yeah, Breath of the Wild did come out on Wii U, but it was just as the Switch was launching, so I don't really count it as any kind of system seller for the older console. It was really nice though for those who had stuck with the Wii U over so many years and weren't ready to go out and buy the Switch straight away. Horrible marketing strategy aside, what didn't help at all was the subject of said marketing. The Wii U was a difficult console to advertise, and we've already beat the whole no one knew what this console was to death, something that probably could have been fixed as easily as having a name for the system without the word Wii in it. Seriously, calling it Wii U really just made it sound like an extension of the Wii, but I digress. Even if you did understand what it was, it's hard to argue that it was a particularly enticing purchase. Yeah, the gamepad tablet had a touchscreen. Yeah, it worked as a second screen from the TV, and yes, it was somewhat innovative and cool for the time, but tablets in general were hugely popular at this point, so no one was gonna buy it for the game playing abilities on the tablet controller itself. Plus, regular tablets like the iPad were all in one, no need for a TV at all. This should sound familiar to a certain device, and if the technology had been possible for the Switch to exist in 2012, I have zero doubt in my mind that console would have outsold the Xbox One and PS4 combined. But of course, that tech didn't exist yet, and there was no killer feature on the Wii U to the same extent of the 2006 Wii and its motion controls, which is novel and ultimately quite gimmicky as those were, still had a real draw to it that was very appealing during a time in video game history where things were getting a bit stale. From the PS2 to PS3 or Xbox to 360, there wasn't a ton of immediate noticeable revolutionary changes, with the better hardware not really being a factor until later on, when high definition, and in the PS3's case Blu-ray, really started to take off in popularity. Thus, the Nintendo Wii, with its fun for the whole family motion controls, as well as a much cheaper price point, just seemed like the logical buy, and there's no question it fully delivered on those promises for millions and millions of users. And what the Wii U didn't have was that same killer feature. The gamepad just wasn't it. And it also wasn't significantly cheaper than competing consoles at a time when those competitors kept getting better and better with that massive leap in power. Not to mention the Nintendo Wii was still a great console and was selling well into the Wii U's life. When the Wii U came out, you could buy both a Wii and 3DS for the same price as the new console. The reasons for the Wii U's ultimate failure are numerous and seemingly unending. From the marketing, the confusion, the lack of gamepad implementation, even in most of Nintendo's own titles, little to no third-party support outside the first couple years, the underpowered hardware that still costed too close to a better console. The Wii U was just not an appealing console unless you were going out of your way to purchase a Nintendo machine. And that wasn't enough, as seen by the lowest sales of any home console Nintendo's ever made besides the absolute monstrosity that was the 1990s Virtual Boy. For the entirety of the Wii U's life, it felt as if Nintendo was both wanting people to buy it, but also trying to shift away from it. That would all make sense come the release of the Switch in 2017. In today's world, with the Switch being as big as it is, it's hard to believe that it wasn't so long ago Nintendo felt completely irrelevant in the video game landscape, with the 3DS being old news and the Wii U feeling like more of a joke than anything else. But it didn't change the fact that the Wii U was still quite enjoyable and had that wide range of accessibility in how you could play it that made it a very positive experience for many of its users. And even today, you might be surprised how much prevalence the Wii U still holds among Nintendo enthusiasts in the community, from the all-in-one Ultimate Nintendo console to homebrewing and emulation. It's hard to call the Wii U a dead system in any way, even if it was undeniably a failure.
So what's new with the Wii U? Is this really how we will play games in the future, or is it just a gimmick?
In terms of what competition's going to do in the future, we'll see. We know that based on our own development, this two-screen gaming experience really is the next innovation that consumers are gravitating to. It's selling extremely well here in the Americas. Already, stocks are quite low in the marketplace. We're rapidly replenishing. And so for us, certainly the consumer is deciding that the innovation is well worth their investment.
In spite of the many shortcomings of the Wii U, as with any Nintendo console, it has managed to attract its own dedicated community centered around it, featuring those who genuinely love the way the Wii U plays, as well as those who really enjoy the homebrewing scene and pushing the system to its limits. The Wii U, with some work, can really be the ultimate Nintendo machine, with any console up to the Wii U being basically playable, either via emulation or the games being able to play natively. Any Wii game is backwards compatible with the Wii U, so you can just plop in a Wii disc and it'll work. GameCube games on Wii U is only possible with homebrewing, which is a process similar to jailbreaking an iPhone or rooting an Android if you're unfamiliar. And I think it's something a lot would consider a necessity at this point for most Wii U owners, or at least those still actively playing it. While it might seem intimidating at first, it's not difficult to do, and it can be quite a bit of fun, though of course you need to be careful, as particularly when it comes to acquiring games to play. Pirating is very much illegal, and the whole emulation scene can be a bit of a gray zone in general. This would be a fantastic time for me to integrate a VPN sponsorship, but unfortunately I don't have one, so I'll just say don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Now that's not legal advice, I just like that it rhymed. Anyhow, looking at things from a modern perspective, the near decade-old Wii U certainly has aged, but as mentioned earlier, it benefits massively in holding up thanks to the relatively low-powered hardware of the Nintendo Switch. It can play in high definition, although to be fair, that isn't the same draw that it used to be. In fact, it's just the bare minimum at this point, and really has been for a good few years. The new fad is 4K, and as of March 2021, approximately 44% of US households that have TVs have one that is 4K capable. And mind you, that's compared to only 31% in 2019, some massive growth. At this point, if you want to buy a TV, it's hard to find one that's not 4K. And as time keeps moving onwards, 4K will become more and more overwhelmingly common as people finally upgrade their old TVs. Now, I'm not going to go off on too much of a tangent or anything, this video is already way too long, but what I'm trying to get at here is that the Nintendo Switch currently not having 4K is a huge downside, especially with the releases of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X already a year ago. I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo does sell an updated model of the Switch within the next year or maybe two, but as of right now, in late 2021, they don't. And this all really helps the Wii U hold up. The hardware is not that far off from what the Switch can do. And it also brings in this whole nother element of the Wii U, although it doesn't involve the console itself. If you have a capable computer, there is a very well-built emulation application called CEMU, which allows you to play Wii U games off your computer. I won't be saying how to set this up or anything, as again, legal gray areas, but it's super cool to get these already really good-looking games like Breath of the Wild up and running at even 4K, looking better than ever. I have a friend who used the Wii U emulator, I think a couple years back, to fully beat Breath of the Wild. Like, look at this footage captured here. I'm sure with YouTube compression, it's going to be hard to get a proper impression of how beautiful it really is in a higher resolution, even if it wasn't made for it. It is really cool. And hooking this up to like a big TV from a PC, that's pretty awesome. But you do need a pretty decent PC to run something like this, and ultimately, it still looks great on both the Wii U and the Switch. I just wanted to show it off more than anything else. And for the record, the Nintendo Switch also has a pretty decent emulator floating around out there. Personally, I've never messed with it, and I don't believe it's as complete, but it's still pretty cool this is all possible. Beyond emulating the Wii U, the system itself can do quite a bit of emulating on its own thanks to homebrewing, as already mentioned. Being able to play games from the N64, SNES, and NES is a fantastic experience, not to mention even some older games from non-Nintendo systems, like say the Sega Genesis. And if the thought of hacking your console makes you a little bit queasy, have no fear. The Nintendo Wii U eShop still has a huge selection of games downloadable and playable via what they call the Virtual Console, such as here, Link to the Past. And this all makes for the overall most complete collection of Nintendo titles from any system they've ever made. The Switch pales in comparison to what the Wii U is capable of in terms of playing these older games. In fact, if you remember going back a bit, I talked about the Wii U being the ultimate Zelda machine, and that's true, but what's even more crazy crazy is that it's really the ultimate Nintendo machine. And right now, it's pretty much capable of playing every single game they've ever made, at least up to the Switch era. And even then, there's not really a whole lot missing from the lineup. Now yeah, you won't be playing Mario Odyssey or Animal Crossing New Horizons on Wii U, but if you look at all the games being sold for Switch right now, a ton of them have been ported over from the Wii U, or just being a very similar version of a Wii U title such as Splatoon 2 or Mario Maker 2. And get this, the best-selling Switch game as of September 30th, 2021 is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at nearly 39 million copies. And remember, that's literally just Mario Kart 8 from 2014 with only a few minor additions. I think Nintendo saw how poorly the Wii U sold and took advantage of that to essentially re-release many of their best games to a whole new audience, something that's been clearly very successful for them. And while it's kind of annoying that Switch games never really get anything in the way of price reductions, with titles from 2017 still often costing what they did 4 years ago, I do think it's really cool that people like me who never had a Wii U when it was relevant still get to experience the best of what it had to offer. And in some cases, Nintendo has already taken a really great game such as Super Mario 3D World, brought it to Switch, and then also pack in basically a fully new small game with Bowser's Fury that kind of combines the gameplay of 3D World and Mario Odyssey for what many reviewers have called the best 3D Mario experience yet. It does bug me when Nintendo is lazy, like with New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, as if the title wasn't long enough already, but when they really take the time to not only add improvements to their older games, but even build upon the foundation to create something actually better, that's just straight up awesome, and it's not something you really see in the video gaming industry very often. I don't want to give Nintendo too much credit because ultimately their end goal is still just to make money, but still it's hard not to respect the insane turnarounds they've pulled off in only about a half decade, and I am really excited to see where they go from here. You shouldn't buy the Nintendo Wii U nearly a decade after it launched, not because it feels old, not because the gamepad is clunky or even bad in any way. In fact, the more I've used the gamepad, the more I've actually liked it, even if it seems oversized. It's quite light and feels surprisingly comfortable to use. The Wii U might just be the most complete Nintendo system to date, but you shouldn't buy it because it never sold too well in its heyday, and unfortunately it's still quite expensive on the used market, and I kinda doubt that'll ever change. Going to eBay.com, the Wii U trends at a price anywhere from $100 and up, usually up, with the more you pay tending to include accessories and games bundled in. You shouldn't buy one unless you find one heck of a deal, whether it be on eBay or on a local marketplace like Craigslist, as it really just doesn't seem worth it to me when the Nintendo Switch isn't that much more in comparison. Mind you, the games for the Switch are insanely expensive, but on the Wii U they're not that much better. Some games are still pretty cheap for the Wii U, but depending on the title, they do seem to be trending upwards when it comes to cost. If you're wanting a Wii U purely for the homebrew scene, do keep in mind that the older Wii is super cheap nowadays and can do pretty much anything the Wii U can, except for play Wii U games and output high-definition video. Now, if you already have a Wii U and are looking for an excuse to break it out again, that's a completely different story. And I'd argue it's still worth a place on your entertainment unit, ideally right next to your Nintendo Switch. As much as I've talked up the Wii U here, there's still no question the Switch is by and far the superior console, and there's nothing quite like being able to play home console games the quality of Breath of the Wild on the go, truly on the go, not just nearby some kind of host system like with the Wii U, but being able to play anywhere and everywhere on a small tablet like this. It's awesome. The Nintendo Switch is both the present and the future, but there's nothing wrong with recognizing the Wii U as the past, even if Nintendo would prefer you forget. It was a decent console based around an innovative concept, albeit one not nearly as appealing as Nintendo had anticipated. And Nintendo left it dead in the water, just like third-party developers did. There were still some admittedly great games made for it, but for the most part, you just saw a strong launch followed by years of disappointment. That, unfortunately, is the legacy the Wii U leaves behind, even if it does deserve recognition for so much more. In the very least, I'm glad we got to take a bit of a look at it today, and while honestly I could probably spend another hour talking about some of the games or Nintendo's strategy, I think it's probably best to end things here. Apologies if I missed anything crucial, and make sure you comment your experiences. I really want to see how many of all of you have actually owned the Wii U and hopefully enjoyed it. If you found the video interesting, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content similar to this. And if you like these kind of longer videos, I'll link some of my others in the description below. below. Also in the description will be my socials. If you feel like following me at 91_tech, that'd be pretty cool. With that all being said, thank you so much for watching. This video might have taken forever to put together, but I did have a lot of fun doing it. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.